What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the Fresh Podcast, where we bring you everything fresh in entertainment. I'm your host, Drew Brumfield, and today we are talking about Mass Effect both 1 and 2. We're not talking about 3 because A, I have not finished playing it, and also, those are very big games, and if we tried to fit all 3 into one podcast, this would be 5 hours long. I'm already expecting this to be a long podcast. But I'm not here alone. Join with me. It's my good friend and resident Star Wars nerd, Randy.
Howdy, howdy.
Yeah. And then, as always, our Mass Effect expert, Seth. How you doing?
I'm doing all right. I definitely didn't think this would ever happen, but here we are. I didn't think this podcast would ever happen.
We did it, Reddit. We did it.
It's been a long time coming of them making me play Mass Effect, wanting me to play Mass Effect.
Drew, at least you're like the first person I know where they never play Mass Effect, and I asked them to please play Mass Effect, and they actually went through with it.
And eventually,
so I appreciate you're the one friend.
It
took a bit.
See, I've told other people to play it, but the only person I've been able to get to play it is my boyfriend. So, like, does that really count? I don't know.
Yeah.
I could just be like, hey, play the game. I see you every day. Play the game.
Yeah. The next one they're trying to get me to do is Persona 5, but I'm not a weeb, so that won't happen. Anyway, Mass Effect 1. Yeah, I have very different opinions about Mass Effect 1 than you guys did. As Seth just mentioned, I have only recently played both these games. And I'll let you guys talk about Mass Effect 1 first, just to get out of the way. So, and just start with, so what are your thoughts on Mass Effect 1? Just a couple general thoughts. I bet you like the game. It's, from your childhood.
I obviously, it's one of my favorite games of all time. I love it. It's the start of like one of my favorite franchises, but it's a game that came out in 2007, and it, even with the remaster, it, like on the Legendary Edition, it still feels like a 2007 game. Actually, it's probably worse than most 2007 games.
Yep.
It's mostly just because, like, this is a prototype. I think that's the best way to approach this. And while it has good story, for the most part, good voice acting and world building, it's just clunky and everything else. It's got combat that just doesn't feel good or snappy, and it doesn't really a good job of balancing both like the action or RPG elements this game has. A lot of its side content is just like copy paste stuff. It's not that interesting, but the story I think still holds up very well. I think introducing you to this universe and throwing all this lore at you about like this giant galactic community with a lot of politics at play and all these different races, it's super great. Like, to me, getting into Mass Effect when I was younger it kind of felt like I imagine what it was like for a lot of people to get into Star Wars the first time. It just suddenly, this whole universe just opens up for you, and you just want to dig into every little nook and cranny. That's how I feel about Mass Effect. It's very clunky, but I still think there are some redeemable qualities about it.
Fair. I guess I should talk about my feelings for it. This was a hard game for me to get through. Like you said, it was made in 2007, and it feels like it was made in the 1800s. I'm joking. But the gameplay for me was like, it was bad. It was really bad. The shooting didn't feel good. The mechanics didn't feel good. Your partners, like, in the combat barely did anything. Like, they were there for emotional support. You had to kill everything. You had to do everything. Obviously, it gets improved. And obviously, it's an older game. But it just felt clunky. And it was one of those things where, like, I was so fed up with the gameplay that I literally had to just throw it on easy and just focus on the story. I did so little side content and everything else that I actually finished the first game, without a romantic interest. I did not romance anyone, which apparently I found out is quite difficult because the game was like tailor-made that you pick someone, even though your options aren't that good in the first game, if we're being honest. but we'll get to characters later. Um, and I just, yeah, if it wasn't for like you guys constantly telling me it's like, no, just get it done, just get to two, just get to two, just get to two, I would have probably dropped the game. It's a hard game to pick up nowadays, like at least in my opinion. I will agree with you. The storytelling's great, and the world building is excellent. It definitely it gives the illusion, and I think it does a better job in two when it does this. But I want to give one credit for it makes you feel like you're exploring the galaxy. You're going to all these different planets and doing all these different exploring things. When in reality, you're just going from hallway to hallway to hallway, just with fancy transitions in the middle. It's not like a very massive like open world type game like that, but it manages to almost kind of trick the player into making you think that just because of how much detail is in all like these hollow things and about the different races and aliens. So world building, fantastic in this game. Gameplay, it is a struggle to get through. Randy, what about you? What are your thoughts on Mass Effect 1?
I'd agree that the gameplay is definitely not as refined as moving forward, especially with like the leap between 1 and 2. I think that yes, the AI is obviously better in 2, but I felt like I could still get your squad mates during fights to do what I wanted them to do. It was less fluid because you would have to pretty much always hold down the button for the power wheel, or bring up your powers that you can use and your squad mates' powers, and you can direct them to do that. There's a setting in the game to where you can have them do on auto use to where they'll use it, but it's still, I think, that's a good for kind of passive playing. But if you want to be a bit more active with it, it's not as fluid in 2 where you can kind of like quick command them to do it with shortcuts. So it's a lot of like, all right, ability, shoot. All right, pull up the power wheel. All right, I'm gonna use this ability. You use this one and you use this one and go. All right, shoot. Repeat the cycle. So it's definitely not as fluid. But I think certain aspects of the gameplay were still, I think, pretty fun. I personally went through, pretty sure I played as a infiltrator, and they have an ability called marksman. And basically you can turn the pistol into a super accurate like machine gun in essence. And so like there's ways I think to have a lot of fun with the game, even with the more dated gameplay. The other thing that I kind of didn't enjoy the most about the game, and I could see why people would get annoyed about it, is the inventory system in the game. It floods you with so much crap. Just say it as it is. It's a bunch of just crap.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes you'll get stuff that's like, oh, this is a huge improvement on what I have. But a lot of the times it's just a bunch of stuff you either already have or whatnot. So, and that's something they fix moving forward is instead of they make the amount of times you pick up items and whatnot, in regards to new weapons and stuff, a lot fewer. So when you actually get that upgrade, it feels more significant.
Yeah, because a lot of the upgrades, at least in the first one, didn't feel very significant. And that's also kind of how I felt about like the actual like classes themselves. Like, and maybe it's just because I was Vanguard, but I felt like at no point did like my class really matter to what I picked, because I could still use every weapon and have majority of the abilities to my disposal. Like there's like different stats and stuff and like bonuses that are better, but it never really felt like it had that big of an impact on my gameplay. But
yeah, if you don't like mind me like hopping in on this too,
yeah.
I think kind of the problem with like a lot of the RPG elements in Mass Effect 1 is, one, I think it doesn't really do a good job of explaining like what each individual ability actually does. Like if you're completely new to Mass Effect and you pick like say Vanguard and you're a biotic, you're like, what's the difference between throw and lift? It's just like you just kind of had to play around with it to figure it out yourself. And the game doesn't explain certain things. Like it doesn't tell you that there is a system where if an enemy is under the effects of biotic, say for 1 power stasis, enemies actually take increased damage when they're under those effects. That's a system that they don't explain that's in the game. Because as far as you know, all it does is like it pushes stuff around. That person goes down on the ground when I use this ability. That's it. It doesn't explain it very well. I also think that like kind of a problem with the RPG stuff is a lot of times when you're upgrading your character, it's like just little percentage things. Like you do 2% more damage with pistols and they overheat a little less, or your ability cools down a little bit quicker. It's pretty standard, kind of boring stuff. There's not a lot to really excite and make you feel like that your character is evolving as like a Vanguard or as a engineer. Like you're just kind of just incrementally getting better.
No, I completely agree. Yeah, but I don't know. Yeah, I can't like think of it. Well, yeah, I completely agree. That's how I felt. I didn't feel like I was playing the game any differently from when I very started to on the very last mission. Like once I got all the abilities, I stuck with it. And again, I went on easy and just bull rushed my way through it to be done with it. But you don't.
And just to add on to that, Drew, like easy, hard. I played this game on the hardest difficulty just because I love going for achievements and stuff like that, and I did it when I was younger. But just to let you know, the only real difference that happens with the harder difficulty is the AI doesn't get smarter. It's just they get beefier in terms of more health, and they deal more damage. And like that's really it. But the AI is still brain dead. So they're still running at you to get shot. They don't really they take cover sometimes, but not a lot. They don't do a lot of flanking or just playing smartly. So like it's basically just about the harder difficulties in Mass Effect is just an endurance test and sort of just min-maxing your stats. Yeah. It's not really, it doesn't really feel like you're playing strategically, which is a shame because it feels like the kind of the power fantasy of this game is you're kind of controlling your sort of personal elite squad with different abilities. That's kind of the power fantasy, but you feel like they're not really getting that much better as the game progresses. Like in terms of like, there's not a cool thing that they do. Like no one gets like, you know, like a Vanguard rush or anything later on. They're just kind of staying the same. Just cooldowns are quicker.
No, exactly. But with all that said, one thing I will give it credit for is this game. This game, honestly, its forefront definitely wasn't about like amazing gameplay. It was about telling a story and about these characters. So I feel like we've harked on the gameplay enough, unless you guys have another thing that you want to complain about with it. But for right now, let's go into. We'll start with favorites. We'll try to stay positive. Who was your guys like in Mass Effect 1? Your favorite squad mate, whether it's like story or just having them with you or anything.
That's a pretty good one.
Good question. Randy, do you have an answer? Or Seth, do you have one?
I have one, but I'm kind of curious to see what Randy will say first.
Yeah, Randy.
Is it even a question? Garrus Vakarian. Every single time.
Yeah, that's a good answer. Yeah, Garrus is definitely one of... When I played this game also, there were very few times I changed my squad. And there were two members that I always had on my squad. And Garrus was definitely one of them. But yeah, Ray, I'll let you tell. Why is Garrus amazing?
Garrus is just... I find him really a good character because he is... is pretty much... Used to be a member of CSEC, so basically Citadel Police Force in essence. I'm just kind of like I hate getting tied up in kind of all the red tape and whatnot to get my job done, which can be, good to be like, all right, you have someone on your team who helps get stuff done and whatnot. But in regards to his part of his character development, is it can kind of give him almost a bit of like, I guess, blinders when he's trying to track down a target or whatnot, or a certain person that he's like, nah, he definitely, like, this guy totally did it, and
he gets tunnel vision.
Kind of give him blinders. Yeah, tunnel vision. And part of his character development is he kind of overcomes that as you do one of his side missions and things like that. So I like his character development there. And he's also just always really loyal to Shepard.
Yeah.
And he's just also a really good bro, and he's fun, and it's kind of fun to see how kind of like dorky he is about stuff. He's kind of socially awkward at times, and I find it really endearing.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the coffin when you called him a bro, because that really is what it felt like. He's just one of the bros. Like him and Shepard has a very fun relationship. Just like, I genuinely believe, even though, like, yes, you are making the decisions for Shepard, no matter what way you go, Shepard would still act a certain way. Which is another thing I forgot to mention with the dialogue options in one. But I just feel like him and Garrus always seem to bounce off of each other really well. And it very much, like, I genuinely believe these two people, despite being different, like, alien races, would be very good friends with each other. So, yeah, I definitely agree that, yeah, Garrus is probably one of the best characters in Mass Effect 1. He's not who I'm going to pick, to be different, and also because there is another one that should be obvious to you two. But yeah, Seth, what about you? Who are you thinking about? Or why do you love Garrus?
I'll hop in real quick to say something about Garrus. Is like, he's essentially like a space cop. That's his backstory, and he's kind of neat because you do end up having this sort of like buddy cop relationship where like you're kind of joking around, but also like you're bros. You got each other's back whenever like shit hits the fan. That's the dynamic with Garrus. One thing I really like though is, it feels like Garrus's own like personal struggle about like, putting limits on yourself versus like just trying to get the job done is like kind of his internal struggle actually plays really well into how you play Shepard as like Paragon or Renegade, in my opinion. Because it's like, I think one of the central conflicts in this game is like, since Shepard has been graduated to basically super space cop for the council, he's a Spectre. That's like this elite unit in this game that essentially they're not really beholden to the laws that other alien races are held to. Like they're sort of like given carte blanche to do what they need to. But like a Paragon Shepard will put limits on themselves to basically be like, there's lines I cannot cross because they're a good person. They're like, I don't want to do that. Where a Renegade Shepard is like, I'll do whatever it takes to get the job done, even if it means sticking my hands in some morally questionable issues. And I think Garrus's own personal journey in Mass Effect is a good reflection of that, because you can have these conversations and they can play out either way, where you're just chatting with Garrus and he's kind of like, I'm just tired of like the red tape and all that. And then Shepard can be like, I mean, the red tape exists for a reason, Garrus. Like, if you don't follow some of the restrictions, you end up like the main villain of the game, Saren. So I like that dynamic too. Yeah. Like, I feel like there's sort of it in a way, depending on how you see it. It kind of gives both Garrus and Shepard some character growth out of it. I like it. I completely agree. I think but going for my personal favorite character in this game, I think it has to be Rex. Compared to all the other characters in this game, Rex is the most, in my opinion, fleshed out and interesting character by a country mile. Even beating out Garrus. Slight spoiler ahead, but like we'll be talking more about Garrus in Mass Effect 2, where I think he gets way more development. But I feel like Rex is if you don't know who Rex is, he's this race called the Krogan. They're basically these like sort of like big, almost like frog type people. It's kind of hard to explain.
Turtle?
Yeah, frog turtle type deal. They're essentially a race of really tough alien warriors who love a fight. However, their race has fallen on really hard times within the past centuries because they're basically they're being oppressed by all the other council races. That's the best way to put it. And so their numbers are dwindling. So you come across Rex, who is just this old Krogan. He's like about 1,000 years old. No joke. He's like roughly around that age. It's not a hyperbole.
Yeah.
And he's seen it all. And the kind of dynamic you get is there's this old mercenary who is just, he's old as shit. He's seen everything. And he's just like, I'm mostly signing up with Shepard because I think it will be actually exciting for once in my life.
There's something to do.
And it's so, yeah, it's something to do. But the more you dig into it, the more you realize, like, it's not he doesn't like give a shit about anyone. He cares about his race and what's happening to them. He's just sort of like stuck in this like sort of nihilistic point of view for now, where he's like, my people will not do anything to help themselves. They'll just keep killing each other for credits. And I think that's just such an interesting place to take that kind of character, where on the surface he just seems like, yeah, I just like to fight. I've seen everything in the galaxy, but underneath it is a person who is legitimately heartbroken about the state of his people, and he wants to improve it, but he's not sure at first how to do it.
Yeah.
And I love Rex. I think he has like some really good heartfelt moments, as much as you can get out of a guy that's mostly like Scales. And the best way I could put it is I love just going on the Normandy and chatting with him, because it's like listening to your grandpa share war stories. It's like, oh, look, Rex is having a Vietnam flashback. Let's sit down and grab some popcorn. His stories are always so captivating. And not only do they flesh him out of how much of a badass Rex is, but it also helps flesh the rest of the world out too. So that's why I love Rex. Not only is he a great gateway into the rest of the Mass Effect universe, explaining stuff about the Krogans and the criminal underworld and like Asari commandos and all this stuff, but you also like get just a really fun and interesting character that I really struggle to think of another character in another game, even from BioWare, that quite matches up to like Rex's very interesting dynamic. So he's my personal favorite.
No, Rex was also the other one on my squad. I'm not gonna lie, I was very surprised that both you guys picked my top two. Because I
feel like a lot of people choose those two.
Yeah, I guess fair. It is kind of like very obvious who's the best ones, but it's like to the point where like I'm probably not gonna pick another favorite because it would have been one of these two. But I just want to again like hark on like Rex, because he like the whole Genophage story about like a population being controlled by this disease is one of the most interesting stories in all of Mass Effect, and it's a lot to do with the fact that this is also Rex's story. And just listening to like the way he talks about it, it's like he starts in Mass Effect. He's the only one where I really saw character growth in Mass Effect 1. Like he starts when you first meet him, like Seth said, just needs something to do. He has such little faith in his own race of just like, we're going to die out. I don't care about us. We're just whatever. And then slight spoilers for the end. And not slight, actually major spoilers for the end of Mass Effect 1. So warning now. But
warning, we're going to spoil Mass Effect 1 and 2 in this podcast.
Yeah.
You chose
but this is the
fault.
first. This is your first one. This is where the edge is.
If you didn't only warning.
Yeah. But the fact, like Rex, there is a moment where he figures out that they can get the Krogan back. They can repopulate the world. And that's where he finally sees, like, maybe there's hope for my people. Maybe I can get them back. Maybe it doesn't have to happen again. And he actually points his gun at you because Shepard wants to stop that. And there is a choice to kill him. And that was the most tense way more than actually fighting Saren. like was the tensest moment was I could lose Rex right here, and Shepard has to explain to him, it's like, look, if they come back, they're gonna be under this bad guy's control, and it's just gonna be worse again. And you have to talk him down and show him that what happened to your people is terrible, but this is not the way to get it back. And I loved having Rex on my squad, like through any missions, his little dialogue, like just mid mission about Shepard, we should just blow it up. And I'm like, Garrus, this is like school children. Calm down. His first solution is always violence, and I love him. And he also has one of the most intriguing stories like in all of Mass Effect 1. So that's why, yeah, Rex is also probably my favorite. Love Garrus, but I have to give it to Rex. In terms of least favorite characters, there's some obvious ones here too. And I'm just gonna go with the one that me and Randy keep memeing about. Is a Miss Ashley Williams, aka the racist, aka who? Thank you, Randy. Yeah. Behind that joke is at the end of the game, that same mission where you could almost kill Rex. There is also a mission where you have to sacrifice one of your teammates, and you have the option between one of the human characters and the other human character. So, and they also are the two most boring characters. We got Caden, aka Kevin or Kyle or whatever his name is, and then Ashley, who throughout the entire game, from start to finish, has been nothing but a stone cold alien racist. Every single decision she makes is like, oh my gosh, we have a Krogan, or we have this alien, or why are we not listening to them? And it's just like, will you shut the fuck up, Ashley, please? I hated listening to her, and that was the easiest decision. Not to say Caden is the most well-developed character. Again, I also, the other running guys, I kept getting his name wrong because I kept forgetting he was on my team. But I would rather take forgettable than, again, racist. And I am aware that apparently she does get better in both Mass Effect 2 and 3. But, I saw it as divine punishment when it said sacrifice Ashley or sacrifice Caden. So that's where she is. She's in the ground, and she's going to be forgotten.
I think I want to hop in on this because it's a difficult topic because I feel like here's BioWare's intention where they're right. There's gonna be space racists in this world. I mean, I think that's like something to like kind of develop and
be realistic.
Yeah, it's like being realistic.
Also
and to be fair, yeah, and like here's the thing though, like Ashley's brand of racism is a very uncomfortable one in that she's like, oh, I'm not being racist. I'm just looking out for humans. It's just like, Ashley, you're being mistrustful of people just because of not even your personal history, your family's weird personal history. And it's because I don't even want to get into it. If you want to know what happens with their family, you can look it up. But basically, it seems like that she has a grudge with the other races, mostly because of how her grandfather was treated during the war, where, guess what? When humanity first made contact with an alien race, we decided to throw hands, and it didn't go well. So,
somehow we lost a fight against beings with literal psychic powers.
To be fair, I don't think humanity lost because it's mostly them fighting against the Turians. It kind of came more down to a standstill because the humanity actually put up a much better fight than I think the Turians were expecting. But that's nerd bullshit. Let's get back to Ashley. I understand what BioWare was going for, but the way they did it is that it was almost to the point where they just drove home so much of like her distrust of aliens and how icky it makes you feel that they're like, you don't really want to bother with like, it's like, I don't care if there is a redeeming quality in Ashley. Like, she's so bad that I don't want to deal with it. Like, I don't even want to put the effort to go see that through, But I will say that there are a couple of moments where, like, Ashley does kind of step up for the more alien crew members, even in Mass Effect 1. Granted, it's not in the best way, but it's something. Like, there's a little side quest on the Citadel, if you come to it later, where basically Shepard runs into this picketer for this party. And when I mean party, it's a political party. And it's a political party that's basically very thinly veiled, like racism. And even Ashley is like, yeah, man, I'm not about that. Like, I'm not down with the Terra Firma party. And she does tell the guy off. Which is funny because it's like, Ashley's been kind of a racist dickhead for most of the game. And then she kind of does this thing where it's just like, hey, you shouldn't talk about alien races like that. That's awful of you. And it's like, Ashley,
it's a little late to be woke, okay?
See,
It's a little late in the game at this point.
And I think it's an issue just because I don't think BioWare did a good job with developing Ashley out. And it is true. Ashley does get better in Mass Effect 3. Basically, she's no longer a racist. So that's nice. I think it's something where BioWare went a little bit too hard with it. And in the end, they just ended up making a character that just made me feel uncomfortable and was just generally unlikable in the first game. She improves later on, but it's like, does anyone
I'll never
really want to
figure out
sit
'cause
through
she's
all
dead
the
in my
bullshit? Yeah. It's like, does anyone really want to go through that to figure it out? It's like, probably not. I played the game so many times that I've seen how she turns out, and I do like it. I do appreciate the growth, but that first game, it's rough with her. Especially when she starts getting into like Shepard's deal about religion and stuff like that, and you're just like, you don't have a problem with Christians, do you? It's like, all right, I'm out. Like, I can't deal with this bullshit. Like, it feels weird. It made me feel very uncomfortable. I was like, Ashley, I said nothing about your religion. I don't know why you're getting defensive
No one
this.
brought this up.
No one.
No
asked.
one brought this up.
So yeah, I do agree that she might be one of the characters I dislike the most in this game.
Is there
in terms of like your companions?
Okay. Randy, what about you? Is there another one, or do you also want to keep bashing on Ashley?
I think we've bashed Ashley enough. So I'll still go the other route, even though I assume most of us ended up saving Kaidan Alenko. I'm gonna bash on him a little because he's still boring as hell. All of your squad mates that you have, and I'll just run through them real quick. You have Ashley Williams, Kaidan Alenko, Liara Tassoni, or not Rex, which we already brought up, Garrus Vakarian, and Tali Zora. Easily out of that, the two human characters, the first two, Ashley and Kaidan, the most boring.
Yeah.
Yes.
Alien species are so much more interesting and I feel better developed in their writing. So now I'll also bash on the other human character. Kaidan Alenko also feels kind of boring. I mean, it feels like, while Ashley at least has at least something that you remember her by.
It's not a positive quality.
Racist. It's not positive.
It's memorable.
If I were to, because Drew, you kept calling him like Kyle or Kevin or whatever.
Yeah.
What was Kaidan's thing? What would he complain about?
Oh, he had headaches. Well, that was it. He had headaches, right?
Yeah.
He
He's
kept
like,
getting
oh
headaches.
no, I was one of the first humans to get through biotic training. I'm an L2. My teachers were abusive.
So
I
yeah,
get
Kaidan's
headaches.
personality, he's a bitch.
Yeah.
Now, I think they could have done more with being like, yeah, I had like these abusive teachers and whatnot, and I remember he does go on one little story tangent about I had this teacher that was being real abusive to this girl, telling her to, I think it was just pull a cup towards her with biotics instead of reaching for it with her hand or whatnot, and she kept messing it up and whatnot, and I think the teacher ends up hitting her or something like that, and then
He
Kaidan,
breaks her arm. I remember that. Kaidan specifically says he breaks her arm.
Oh, okay. Yeah. And then Kaidan, doesn't he slam the guy into the wall or something like that?
Yeah, he just biotic pushes him, and it kills. And it by accident, Caden accidentally kills him.
Yeah. So I don't know. I feel
Hmm.
like there could have been maybe more to that, or maybe more emotion with the line delivery. But I guess
Yeah.
that could kind of be said maybe throughout all of the first game. Some of the line
Yeah.
deliveries maybe a little dead. Sometimes. But yeah, I don't know. I just felt like Caden was also pretty boring. While in comparison to at least like your other squad
Yeah.
mates that are these interesting alien races that have interesting backstories and whatnot.
And I want to point
I'd
out
much rather
they're
talk
not
about them.
they're not boring just for the fact that they're human. Because in Mass Effect 2, there are a couple human characters that actually are interesting. The DLC ones.
I would say, yeah, and also like
but-
not directly companions, but there's also interesting companions on the Normandy, even in Mass Effect 1. I
Yeah.
would say like
Joker is
Joker.
Joker is super
Joker's fun.
memorable.
Yeah. I like
Yeah,
Joker a lot.
What's the doctor's
Joker's
name?
great.
Because I don't have
Dr. Chocolates.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love Dr. Chocolates.
And I think probably the biggest standout, Keith David as David Anderson, who is like Shepard's mentor figure in the first game, is like he's like, granted, he's mostly in the beginning of the game, and then he has a part towards the end of it. But I think David Anderson is also like, he's one of my favorite characters in this
Yeah.
whole series.
So they're able to write
and he's not
interesting
a
characters with humans.
Yeah. It's just that for some reason the companions here are lackluster. And I think what it is and it's just a general issue with a lot of Mass Effect 1 is it's the first game. They're trying to introduce the player to this whole universe, to all these different races and their culture. So you get Garrus on your team. He teaches you about Turian culture in a sense. You get Tali. She teaches you about Quarian culture. Rex, Krogan, so on and so forth. And when it gets to the humans, it's like, okay, let's develop this stuff. Ashley is Systems Alliance military, also racist. So we got to develop that with humanity. And then also Caden is about talking more about biotics and humanity, because basically they wanted to have the Force in Mass Effect without calling it the Force, so they call it biotics. And it's like, well, how did humans get it? It's like, okay, here it is. Apparently it's like superhero stuff. You get exposed to enough radiation and you get it. Or get cancer. That's another possibility.
Yeah.
But I think that's kind of Caden's problem, and also Ashley's, and when we get to her, Liara as well. But their problem is they're all about just mostly being a mouthpiece to either a race or a certain aspect about the wider galaxy. But they themselves as characters is kind of one note. It's very like whatever. There's not a lot going on under the hood besides the fact that like you're supposed to represent this. You're supposed to introduce me to this concept.
Yeah.
That's kind of the problem with it.
No, I agree. Yeah, and there really isn't there are no other options for really like when it's who's the least favorite character in Mass Effect 1. And I almost wonder if that's why they made the choice what it was. Because they're like, well, Mass Effect, we don't actually want to lose these really in-depth, like, they would never, at least in the first game, make the choice like, oh, Liara or Ashley. Even though I don't like Liara that much, I think she, at least in the first game, I'll talk about her more in the second, but in the first game, she's very basic. Like, she
Yeah,
doesn't have,
I mean, all the complaints we just had about people being kind of one note, Liara is kind of similar.
but at least she's an
I'd say
alien.
in some aspects.
Yeah, she's
But like at least she's there to introduce us to an interesting new culture in
yeah.
comparison to just like, hey, this is how we got biotics.
Yeah,
Or-
so it's like if the choice was like Liara or Ashley, no one would have ever picked Ashley. Or if it was
Oh, yeah.
like Caden or like Garrus, like it would have been like a 99 to 1% on that choice of who picked who. So I guess in the end they were just like, it's almost like they knew, hey, we didn't do much with these two, so we're okay with just throwing them away, basically.
Yeah.
But with all that said, actually, no,
Oh,
keep
hold
going.
on, real quick.
Yeah, you're
Before we move on, because like I think it's you're right. We'll talk about Liara much more later. But one thing was, because I knew Caden and Ashley were going to be the ones that were like the most hated on crew members. I get and I absolutely believe they both deserve that spot. It really comes down to what day you ask me of like, is Caden or Ashley lower? It's like, just depends on when you ask me. But I think most disappointing crewmate is Liara. I know we're not having a most disappointing, but I think category. But I think Liara goes in that for the first game, at least, just because, as what we talked about, she's kind of boring. She's this she's an Asari who basically is conveniently a race of blue humanoid supermodels, and they're all female passing. That's the Asari race. They're supposed to be like the oldest race, and because of that token, supposedly the most wise and most biotically powerful. And Liara is just sort of like this. She's a nerd, best way to put it, but not a nerd in like a really fun way. She's just, one of the things that really bothered me is how quickly she becomes infatuated with Shepard just for being nice to her.
She's like,
and oh my God, you're nice and you have these amazing visions. And it's so impressive that you can handle this. Wow. You must be very strong. And I'm just like, shut the fuck up.
It's like, I've known you for
you're
like
horny.
20 minutes.
Yeah. That's like the first conversation you have with her.
At least take me on a date first.
Like, goddamn.
Yeah. And it's a shame because, like, in a sense, after Mass Effect 1, Liara's, outside of Shepard, Liara starts to basically become sort of the face of Mass Effect after Mass Effect 1. It's a shame that her relationship, how it starts off here, is very just not even rocky. It's just bland. It's just kind of boring. She becomes so infatuated with Shepard very quickly. Outside of some neat moments where if you take her to Noveria, where she gets to confront her mom, outside of that, there's not really a lot going on for her in terms of a character.
Yeah.
So I think she's going to be like my most disappointing squad mate because you see, but at the same time, she gets way better in the later games.
Yeah.
So
that's why
it's just something to throw in there.
I was going to bring that up because I completely agree. I think she's incredibly bland and boring. Like once you take away the fact that it's like, get over the fact like, oh, she's an alien. She's blue. I forget, if I wasn't looking at a list right now, I forgot her name a lot too. I would call her a lot of other things. You meet a lot of other Asari, and you know, not to be an Ashley, but they kind of look the same. They all, like Seth said, they're all supermodel blue people. So she doesn't really even stand out from like even some of the side characters.
Not a single overweight Asari in sight.
No. Yeah, it's terrible.
It's weird. It's weird.
So, and just to say that we talked about everyone, because the last one is Tali, and at least in my opinion, Tali is a way more interesting love interest for her because she doesn't have much in the first game, but it's still more than her. This more than Liara, and I'll talk about more about Tali once we get to Mass Effect 2 because she is one of the squad mates that can come back. But I just want to reiterate, like, I agree with Steph. Liara is definitely one of the more disappointed characters, especially like going into this game. I saw her face everywhere. She's like one of the main people on like the cover art. Like she's kind of almost directly in the center, and like I recognized her just because I heard about her or everything, and it was just something that I was like very disappointed when I finally got to this game and met her. But
yeah, she's kind of like the Spock of the Mass Effect universe in a sense, where she's like, you got Captain Kirk.
She's like if Spock was horny.
Yeah, pretty much. I do want to add to make sure we know it, like, because you mentioned it. Tali is not romanceable in the first Mass Effect. She is romanceable in the second one. Drew, I know you know this. I'm just clarifying it for people who might be listening in.
Yeah.
But I think that actually works to her benefit because, yeah, she may not be like the big standout in the first game, like with Garrus or Rex. But I think one thing that really works for her is she does get a chance to basically be her own character in the first Mass Effect, so that by the time you get to Mass Effect 2, and if you do decide to pursue a romance, there's actually, you already know there's a character there. Without the romance. violence aspect of it, which
Yeah.
makes it way more compelling to make that choice.
Agree. Okay. But I think that's everything with Mass Effect 1. Because we keep referencing 2. So I think it's appropriate that we actually go and officially start talking.
Okay.
Oh,
It's-
never mind.
I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. If we're going to go into Mass Effect 2, there is one more thing I want to talk about, and I might be alone in this, but I do want to throw a big shout out to another character I really like in Mass Effect 1, and that's the villain. I really like Saren.
I was about to say, I'm like, we gotta hit the story at least a little and talk about the bad guy.
Oh, fair enough.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess we only referenced. We never actually talked about him.
And it's a shame because like Saren is one of my favorite video game villains of all time. He may not be the top 10 or whatever for a lot of people, but he's one of my personal favorites in this series. And to be honest, after this point, there's really no villain that comes close to Saren in the rest of the Mass Effect series. Not saying that everybody else is bad. It's just I like Saren because you don't really interact with him that much, but you kind of get his sort of like mythos and legend built up based on the people who talk about him. Because you're constantly on his trail, you're seeing all the awful shit he does, and you're also seeing how much power and how much sway he has over corporations, over the government, like with the council and all this stuff. And it's just because he was just the agent pulling all these favors, and no one bothered to question his methods until it was too late. And I think what makes him so compelling is when you finally do meet with him on Vermeer, and he sort of lays down the dealio of like, hey, the reason why I'm about to bring about the apocalypse in the Mass Effect universe is because I've seen what happens to us, and we don't win. He is like the ultimate doomer. He dooms so hard that he's like, we just got to grovel and basically be the pet of the Reapers and hope we survive. That's the only way we survive this. Like, for some reason, that feels like such a, for lack of a better word, human way of looking at a problem. Like, it's just like, I'm so down in the dumps that like I believe that the only way we'll survive this is if we just give up.
Yeah.
And if we just like sign away our freedoms.
It's more.
And it
It's
it makes it.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
And I don't have much more to say. It just makes him such a cool and compelling villain. And I feel like based on how you play Paragon or Renegade Shepard, he's like a really good sort of like mirror / opposing force of Shepard. Like almost like if you play it as like a Renegade Shepard throughout the game, you're basically just falling into the same footsteps as Saren. You're doing everything because you believe in a greater good, but you're hurting a lot of people to do it. Versus like a Paragon Shepard versus Saren is like you're basically like you're complete opposites, and I love that dynamic.
Yeah.
So that's what I have to say about
Yeah.
Saren.
I played through it as a complete Paragon, which also fun. If you do it right and you pick the right dialogue option, you can make Saren shoot himself, and then like you can convince him to your side. Now you still have to fight a phase 2, but you can skip a whole phase of that boss fight, which I found fun. But the actual cool thing is, I like that, you know, when you actually meet him, it's not. I thought it was going to be something very simple and basic, just like, oh, I'm here because they promised me power, and yay, power, I'm a villain. But no, he actually does have like motive. He's just like, I'm terrified of that thing. Like, I have all this power, I have all this wealth, and I can't do anything against these big bads. Like, he just sees it as just the ultimate apocalypse. And he's like, this is literally our one chance of survival. So yeah, I did like Saren. He was one of the more memorable, like, especially like, and we'll get to 2's, but yeah, 2's like main antagonist just didn't really hold up. I like the story of 2, but it didn't really have a good like opposing force or a good figurehead to be in charge of that opposing force. Randy, what about you? The final boss of 1.
Yeah, I think Saren's ideologies and stuff like that were really interesting to kind of go up against and whatnot, of just being, as Seth said, like, I'm just terrified of these Reapers that are coming here, and they're gonna pretty much wipe out the galaxy, and the only thing we can do is to try and show that we provide a purpose and can be of use to them. Otherwise, they're just going to kill us all. Because they've done it before, and they did it with the Protheans before, and they were wiped out. So, I think going up against that of having someone who's just completely given up, and then your character Shepard, who's just like, no, we can't give up. We have to continue to fight. It just sets up for having a good opposing ideas for the villain and the hero.
All right. Now, so before I make that transition again, anything else with one?
No, I think we're good.
Okay.
I just wanted to talk about Saren because I just don't think he gets enough love as a villain.
Yeah. But yeah, these are big games and there's a lot in that. And an even bigger game than Mass Effect 1, you thought I was out of transition, is Mass Effect 2. And in my opinion, and I think in most people's opinion, huge improvements in every single way. Your squad is twice the size as the first one, majority of them being new people, but still interesting. The gameplay is actually fun this time, with a lot of both quick commands, but you can still pause it and, activate your commands. I feel like your squad has more impact in the fights. And, also with dialogue, it isn't always as clear. Like, it's not always the top one is the nice one, the middle one is the in-between, the bottom one, Shepard will curse at them and, insult their mother. Now it's a bit more, it's not as harsh. And I feel like in almost every way, Mass Effect 2 is a much bigger improvement than 1. So, again, we'll start off general things. Randy, I'll start with you this time. Mass Effect 2.
Mass Effect 2.
Mass Effect 2.
Mass Effect 2.
Okay, Seth, your turn. That
What
was
a
Randy's
game.
talk. No, I'm joking.
Now, what a game. Okay. This one's a lot more fresh in my mind. My boyfriend Will just finished playing it 2 days ago.
Mhm.
So just coming at it from his perspective, and I guess also most everyone's perspective, it is a lot more enjoyable to play through than Mass Effect 1 because of the they focused really hard on improving the gameplay and how it feels to play and I mean, not that to say that they put aside other things. The story is good and the dialogue is good. The characters are well written and stuff as well. But they improved a lot in regards to the gameplay, how the weapons feel, being able to quick command powers and whatnot from your teammates, and from just yourself. Because I think before, unless you were playing on PC, I think you could only map one button or one of your powers as a quick action. I think if you're using like a standard controller or whatnot on the first game. And then in Mass Effect 2, you have 3. You can have I'll just use Xbox controls. Like you have your main one, your Y, left bumper, and right bumper for quick actions for you. And then you have left on the D-pad, right on the D-pad for quick actions, as long as you're pointing at an enemy for your squad mates. And I don't remember if this was a thing in Mass Effect 1 or not, but they start to you can now set up like combos, whether it be like fire explosions. I'm pretty sure you can still set up biotic explosions in Mass Effect 2.
It's always hard to remember. But
I know you definitely can in 3, but
I remember there was something with like warp that you could do. Like if you can warp an enemy and then hit them, like if they have like a barrier and you hit them with warp, and I think if you hit it with throw, it would blow up the barrier or something like that in Mass Effect 2. There is like some sort of combo system, but it's like very primitive compared to where it's going to be in Mass Effect 3.
Yeah. But still, regardless though, they improve a lot in regards to the gameplay and along with the characters as well. And just as kind of an overall for the story, it's basically like, all right, you're on this big mission to pretty much go to the head base of the big bad. And it's pretty much, all right, I need to build a squad for this. And then it's pretty much get your squad, get prepared for this mission, and go in for it. So it's, I don't know, it's a lot about just building up. And then by the time you get to this final mission, you have all that anticipation, and they keep harping on it like this is basically a suicide run, suicide mission. They say it multiple times. So by the time you get to that final mission, it's a lot of just, oh God, who's going to live? Who's going to die? Is everyone going to live? Did I mess up? Did I tragically mess up? And is everyone going to die? So I think they did I think they did pretty good with like putting the stakes of that mission like prepared and ready. And it's great.
Yeah. No, I definitely agree. One of like the biggest improvements for me from 1 to 2 was obviously the gameplay, but more specifically the class system. Because it, like I said, in the first one, I don't think it mattered what class you picked. You can really still play. Like I could pick Vanguard and just keep picking sniper rifles and assault rifles and blow through everything like that if I just upgrade my perks correctly. But in this one, the classes feel a lot more specialized and a lot more like unique to that. Especially with Vanguard, with now the ability to biotic charge people, which was that's easily my favorite ability of just bum rushing people, just tackling them to get my shields back, and just constantly zipping around the map with that, and then a shotgun with 3 rounds that blew people in half. And that was a lot more fun to do versus in 1. And so I like the fact that they made each of the classes more unique and more separated from each other. Like I'm not even allowed to use sniper rifles as a Vanguard, but I'm okay with that. Because that means that now I have to make sure my other squad mates can make up for my class's weaknesses. Which is why I really liked having Garrus almost all the time in my squad, because he has a sniper rifle, and a lot of long range attacks. That adds a little bit, it's not the most complex system, but it adds a little bit more like uniqueness to your playthrough. It just makes going through missions actually like fun. I understand that what you want to do most in these games is just talk and get through the dialogue and the story, because it is the most enjoyable. It's a good thing that they finished 1 and were like, okay, what were the things that we need to improve on? And it's very easy to see what are the improvements. Seth, what about you? What were some of the biggest things for you going from 1 to 2?
Yeah, I would hop in and agree with you about like the gameplay aspect. I was talking about how kind of the problem with Mass Effect 1's RPG elements is you're spending a lot of points for like incremental percentage boosts, which are nice and you will see a difference, but it's like, it just means my sabotage is doing more damage than usual, Like It's not that exciting. But in Mass Effect 2, yes, they've kind of sort of I dumb it down, quote unquote, where you're not spending as many perk points, but what they do is each time you spend it, it's like you're making a choice of like how a ability or how your character behaves. Like let's take Overload. It's a very simple ability. It's in Mass Effect 1. It's in all Effect games. It's an ability where you send out a shock pulse that's job is to do some damage, but mostly destroy an enemy's shields. Well, now in Mass Effect 2, they give different options, like little things like, oh, do you want your shield, do you want your overload to do more damage to shields? Or do you want to do it so that like it has a wider area of effect? So it will attack multiple targets when you cast it. It's like, okay, that's cool. Like I have to make choices, and there's some tactical advantages to that. And again, you mentioned with the class systems, it's so cool. I think the smartest thing they did is giving each class a unique ability just to that class. Like, yes, Vanguard, they get the charge, which allows them to basically go at super speed across the map and slam into a target. And you can evolve that however you want to. One of my personal favorites is Infiltrator. That's the sniper class. They get appropriately a cloaking ability that allows them to go invisible, get a little bit of stealth, and gives them a damage boost when they're using sniper rifles. It's also like Soldier's very simple, as the name implies. It's the soldier class, but they also get like a slow mo, do more damage ability. It's not the most exciting thing in the world, but it looks cool. And if you're playing a soldier class, you probably want something simple like that.
They get the max pain mode.
Yeah, it's pretty much max pain. It is pretty much max pain mode, and I also feel like just in general, everything has been improved. Like the RPG elements are smaller, but they feel tighter and they feel more impactful now whenever you like change how a character builds out. I feel like AI all around is much better. Like you actually feel like you're playing a competent third-person shooter now when you're playing. Like the gunplay feels pretty good in Mass Effect 2. Yeah. I wouldn't say it's the greatest thing in the world, but it's pretty good, especially compared to what it was.
Yeah, that's for sure.
And being able to like actually like have tactics where the enemy AI is much smarter and they just have so much better combat set pieces. Oh my god. I just remembered one of my favorite combat set pieces is during a recruitment mission on Ilos, which is like it's basically Coruscant in Mass Effect, where you are walking across this connecting bridge to another skyscraper that's under construction. You see the city skyline. You see like the flying cars flying below and above you, and you're getting on a shootout on this long ass bridge. And I remember bringing like biotic teammates that could like lift and throw people off the bridge, and I was like, "This is cool."
The same thing.
Yeah, it's such a cool moment, and the game is chock full of those kinds of stuff. Not only is the story now hitting in Mass Effect 2 like it did in the first game, but the gameplay is so much better. And in turn, it feels like you're finally feeling like you're in tune with your squad. That's why you get more invested in them now, is because like you know how to play to their strengths. Because the RPG elements are better. Mass Effect 2 is easily just it's my favorite of the trilogy, and simply put, it just has really good blend of RPG elements and that third person shooter combat. Like it melded together so well.
I completely, yeah. I don't know what more to say about. I'll say this as well because Randy brought up the inventory system. I'll let you also talk about it, Randy, but like the fact that like I'm not just grabbing 50 different like sniper rifles or just random materials anymore is great. Anytime I find a new weapon, the weapon plays dramatically different than whatever I did. Like I could have a shotgun that has a bunch of rounds and fires like a burst fire, or I could have this one that only has like 3 shots in it, but it does a lot. Or even the extreme version of that, there is a 1 bullet in this chamber, but it will do a bunch of damage. So yeah, there were, and maybe you could also talk about like some of like the very different weapons that you can get, because it's a lot different in 2, and it feels better whenever you find a new weapon.
Yeah, for sure. Because I went through it as an infiltrator, and then when Will just went through it, he was also an infiltrator. But he went through and had like the sniper rifles and stuff like that. Because I think you initially start with the Mantis, which is a traditional traditional for Mass Effect, like 1-shot bolt action rifle in essence. And then you can go up from there, and you can get something like I think the Viper, which can do, I think it's like 6 shots before you have to reload, but it's almost more like an assault rifle because of how quickly you can fire in succession.
It's like a DMR type deal, like a marksman rifle.
And then you can go even further than that with the Insignet or something like that. It's a 3-round burst sniper rifle, which is, I don't know, it's something they're like, let's do something weird with it. But every time that you do get these new weapons, and you find them on the ground, they're never to the point where it's like, oh, well, you have to use this now for the next big section. You usually within like the next door or even the same room, there'll be a weapons loadout area, and you can switch back to, your traditional, if you fired a couple times, I don't want to try this out. I just want to stick with what I know.
Yeah.
You can switch weapons back to what you were using pretty quickly. But yeah, the inventory wise, it's good that they're not just bombarding you with stuff. They make it easy for you to switch back out if you're like, I don't want to try this. And to also go on with levels, what Seth was saying is that, yeah, I think each character basically has 4 different skills. One is pretty much their passive, just like, hey, they're better at shooting and they have more health.
Yeah.
And then like 2 other abilities, and then a last ability that's unlocked after you do like their loyalty mission, in essence. But each of those 4 abilities basically have 4 progress points, in essence. So they simplify it way more in comparison to what it was in the first game, and I think that was definitely to their advantage. Because as much as like a true RPG can be fun for people, I think it can be hard sometimes to adapt a true RPG, especially in that time when not as many people were doing it. Like 4 controllers and 4 consoles, in comparison to like a PC. I know we have like RPGs now, like in modern days, that flesh it out, do a pretty decent job of it. But this game came out, what, 2010, right?
Yep, 2010.
Yeah, 2010. So not as many. And so I think they focused really well on just like, all right, let's try and refine this and make it more enjoyable, at least in regards to their gameplay.
Yeah, I agree. So before we get on to the characters, because we'll talk about, and for this one, because all these characters are unique, we'll talk about each one in 2. But before we talk about them, and the world building will come with us talking about the characters, but I want to address the villain of this, the collectors. And this, well, I think it's a cool concept and a cool villain. I think this is the one thing, and I'm glad Seth brought up Saren during Mass Effect 1. This is the one thing that I will say 2 does not do as well. Because there is technically the Harbinger, which is he can take control of any of the animals, and not animals, any of like the enemies and
The collectors, yeah.
any of the collectors, you see them. And I think they're cool in concept, but you never get the sense of like that you're antagonist like you do with Sarah. There is not an opposing of ideology. They are just villains to be villains. They are working for the Reapers, and they're just like, we just need humans to make our own Reaper, and screw you, we're evil. You know, there's not like a head guy. Well, it technically is with Hardra, but he doesn't really even talk to you that much. He's just kind of like Die Shepherd more than anything. At least that's how I got. What are your guys' thoughts on the Collectors as a villain?
Man, it's going to be interesting to talk about this, especially with not spoiling Mass Effect 3.
No, okay.
Yeah, but like I can talk around this. It feels very, once you play Mass Effect 3, especially, you're going to realize like Mass Effect 2's story really doesn't matter that much in the grand scheme of things. It's very clearly like, it feels like BioWare was like, okay, we want to make this a trilogy of games. We have the first game where they introduce them, and then I guess, spoiler, you do end up facing off against the Reapers in the third and final game. But they were like, what do we have for the second game? We can't have Shepard fight the Reapers yet. The problem is they're like, well, we can't do the Reapers. We'll have the Collectors. They'll be sort of like the Reapers, but they're more like a helping them kind of distraction. That's the problem with them. It's like they're not that, like, they're cool. I like their design. Like these, like, this mysterious bug race with like weird bioorganic technology. Like all their weapons and even their guns are like these. They look like alien heads. Like, have you seen Starship Troopers? Like the way the aliens look in that?
Yeah, I know what they look like.
Their weapons look like they cut off the heads of one of those aliens and started using it as a gun. And it's like, that's kind of cool, but I agree with Drew. They kind of lack like a central personality or antagonist to really make you feel like, oh shit, this is a threat, you know?
Mm-hmm.
I feel like the closest thing to an antagonist in the game, and they're not really like, and he's not really like the antagonist of the game. He's kind of like just a unknown element of like, can you trust him? Can you not? And it's the elusive man. And that really depends on how you play Shepard. It's like, if you're Paragon, you know that the elusive man is like, all right, you get into some shifty stuff. I don't know if I really trust you at all. And if you're Renegade, you're kind of like, well, I mean, I do evil shit anyways, so yeah, I'll trust you or whatever. And I feel like he's the closest thing to like a sort of antagonist. And he's not really an antagonist. He's just sort of like a unknown element in the game. But he's compelling. He is a compelling character, the elusive man, at least.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I don't know if I'd see him as, which, by the way, speaking of the elusive man, voiced by the very talented Martin Sheen. You want to talk about throwing me off when I started that? I think I even messaged Seth, why did no one tell me Martin Sheen was in this game and like a very big character in this game? Like, and it's very obvious, like when you listen to him, like, oh gosh, that's High, very well known Hollywood actor. Like, you know, it threw me off. But I mean, I agree. He's a great character and a very like interesting, like mysterious character. But I don't know if I'd classify him as a villain, at least in this game. Maybe
he's not.
Yeah, I know he comes back for 3, and given how this game ends, probably. Well, I guess he could be your friend or not, but it's an interesting character, and I'm assuming more will be revealed about him in 3. But I haven't played 3, so we won't talk about him. Yeah. Randy, what about you? Before we get into like your squad mates, what are your thoughts on like the collectors?
I guess, I mean, we already spoiled a bit by you saying, and we already said we were doing spoilers. I thought, albeit they didn't have a direct like main big bad like we did with Saren, I think they did try and make you hate them a pretty good amount by just being like, hey, this ship, like, and the collectors were the ones that blew you the fuck up and you died at the beginning of the game. Shepard dies.
I'm about to say that's not a spoiler. That happened in the first 5 minutes.
Well, no, I'm getting there.
Yeah.
And so they're like, all right, the collectors, they killed you. They had like you and your squad mates all get separated. They killed pretty much all of your entire original crew, minus the squad mates in essence. They're also taking all of your, they're taking a bunch of human colonists and stuff, attacking these worlds and taking away. So kind of as a human, you're like, oh gosh, I should help them. And then moving further into that, they attack your ship and take a bunch of your crew, in essence, minus the squad mates, right before the final mission.
Yeah.
And so they try and push this like, hey, you hate them and whatnot. And I think what's really sad on their part is you end up learning in Mass Effect 2 is you learned that the collectors were actually the Protheans that were wiped out pretty much the cycle before.
Yeah.
And so I like, yes, there's not this huge big bad, but I find it's really interesting, I think, to learn more and more about them. And I agree with Seth, like their design is super cool. And I think honestly they're probably one of the hardest factions to fight in all of the Mass Effect trilogy, in my opinion anyway.
That is true. Yeah, I agree with that.
And so yeah, I think despite them not having like a main antagonist and whatnot, I think, you know, they definitely served their purpose for getting you amped up and whatnot for this final mission.
Yeah. Maybe I was
Fair
a bit
enough.
harsh on them, and I agree with Randy on this. Like, one thing they do, at least there's 2 things that they do really well with the collectors, not just their design. They do make them very mysterious. Like, most of the game, you're just trying to figure out what their deal is, which is like kind of a cool motivator to make you want to learn more about like this new force, this new enemy. But also they do a really good job of setting right from the get-go, they are very much a credible threat. Like as Brandy put it, they completely decimate the Normandy and kill Shepard at the start of the game. And that's really just the tip of the iceberg once you see what they're starting to do to like all the other colonies and stuff like that with them abducting them and like their advanced technology. So while they do lack the personality, I do agree that it doesn't make them any less of a threat, though. They are definitely like a credible force to be reckoned with.
Yeah, fair. I can see it. But enough about the villains.